We're in a sermon series just simply called I Am. And over the last 6 weeks, this is our sixth week, we have just been looking at the different I Am statements that Jesus made in the Gospel of John. So if you wouldn't mind, would you join me this morning as we turn to the Gospel of John today, John chapter 14. If you don't have a Bible, didn't bring a Bible, feel free to grab the black pew Bible in front of you. John chapter 14 is on page 847 in those pew Bibles. While you're turning there, have you ever been homesick? Really homesick. I can remember the first time that I really felt that tug towards home. Believe it or not, it wasn't when I was a child. It wasn't like when I went to youth camp or RA camp. Anybody remember RAs? A few of you. It wasn't in any of those kind of scenarios. The first tug that I remember towards home actually came when I was a seminary student. I was taking a part of a program in seminary called the Oxford Study Program. And in the Oxford Study Program, we got to spend a portion of our summer. We traveled over to Oxford University in England and stayed at Regent's Park College while taking a few classes through the seminary. And listen, it was one of those incredible experiences. Like, we got to do some incredible things. For example, you may know Oxford was the home of C.S. Lewis, and so we got to go to C.S. Lewis's home. We got to go down the street to the pub where C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of The Lord of the Rings, would meet together. The Inklings would meet together. They'd talk about their work. I mean, how'd you like to be in that booth with those guys? Like, holy cow. So we got to do some of those type things. We take little day trips to see places like John Newton, where his church where he wrote Amazing Grace, or John Bunyan, the author of Pilgrim's Progress, like so many different things. And it was amazing until about day 4. About day 4, that's when the novelty of England began to wear off. The longings of home began to settle in. Like, no doubt, I began to miss Holly, and those phone conversations that we'd have occasionally were just not enough. Our oldest son at the time, Seth, was only 3 months old. And here I was on the other side of the world. I began to miss the sight of my little son's face. I began to miss the little baby smells, like not the diaper smells, but those sweet smells of a little boy in your arms. Like, I missed his face. I began to wonder if he would miss mine or if he would even recognize mine when I got back. I was homesick. I was homesick for Tex-Mex and queso. If I'm honest with you, I was hungry for anything that had flavor, because British food doesn't have much taste. I started missing drinks with ice in it. Cars that drove on the right side of the road. I started missing the familiarity of home and people that I knew and loved. There was this uncomfortable tug in my heart of being homesick. And it was amazing because I was surrounded by some of the most incredible things known on earth. And those things could distract me for a while, but then when I got still enough, I just started longing for home. And I remember in one of those moments, I found myself down by the river in Oxford, and I was reading, of all things, C.S. Lewis's book, Mere Christianity. As I sat beside the river, I read this quote from Mere Christianity, where C.S. Lewis writes these words. He says, "Creatures are not born with desires unless satisfaction for those desires exists. A baby feels hunger. Well, that's because there is such a thing as food. A duckling wants to swim. Well, that's because there's such thing as water. Men feel sexual desire. Well, that's because there is such a thing as sex. But if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, then the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. If none of my earthly pleasures satisfy it, it does not prove that the universe is a fraud, but probably earthly pleasures were never meant to satisfy it, but only to arouse it and to suggest the real thing. As I pondered those words, I began to realize that in many ways what C.S. Lewis was talking about is that it is possible to be homesick for a place that you've never been. A place where the deepest longings of your soul finally find their home. You see, the truth is there is a longing in every single one of us for our hearts to find a home. There is a desire that this world all by itself cannot fulfill. In other words, listen, brothers and sisters, we were made for so much more. And our heart aches until it finds its true home. And the reason I bring this up this morning is because this morning we are looking at the 6th I am statement of Jesus in the Gospel of John. And you may remember, as we've been talking about over the last 6 weeks, you may remember that Jesus, 7 different times in the Gospel of John, makes these bold statements, these declarations of who he is and why he has come. And Jesus does this by taking the name of God from the Old Testament. You remember the name I am, the name that God gave to Moses in Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. That name I am. And 7 different times Jesus takes the name I am and he adds a practical description, an illustration that describes who Jesus is as God. So for example, just trace back our journey. So in John chapter 6, Jesus said, I am the what? The bread of life. In John chapter 8, Jesus said, I am the light of the world. In John chapter 10, the first part of it, Jesus says, I am the door of the sheep. And then just right after that, in John chapter 10, a little bit later, Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. Last week, we looked at the 5th I am statement where Jesus says in John chapter 11, he says, I am the resurrection and the life. And this morning, the 6th I am statement comes in John chapter 14, verse 6, where Jesus is going to say these words, I am the way, the truth, and the life. In other words, here are the handles. Here's the handle that I want to give you this morning to hold on to. This is what I want just running through your brain as you think about this I am statement. Like Jesus is the only way home. Jesus is the only way home. Now, in order for us to fully understand this I am statement, we once again need to think about it in the context of John chapter 14. So when you think about the context of John chapter 14 comes in the midst of what many people would call the farewell discourse of Jesus. So everything that happens in this passage happens on the night of Jesus' betrayal. Like Jesus has just shared the Last Supper, the Passover supper with his disciples. He's already washed their feet. He's already begun to prepare them for his departure. And in John chapter 13, Jesus begins to tell them some really difficult news. He says, for example, John chapter 13, skip back just one chapter, John chapter 13, verse 21. Some of the disturbing news that Jesus tells them is in verse 21, where Jesus says, one of you is going to betray me. Like, can you imagine the silence around the table at that moment? Like, don't you want to know if the disciples were even looking up? I mean, were they still playing with their food? Like, I'm not going to look around now, right? Jesus says, one of you is going to betray me. Like, it was a It was a difficult scene. And then just a few verses later, in John chapter 13, verse 33, Jesus says, I am only going to be with you a little while longer. You will seek me, and just as I said to the Jews, now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. Like imagine the shock of those words. Like the disciples had gone everywhere with Jesus. They left everything to follow Jesus. Like why would Jesus leave them now? Like of all times, why would Jesus leave them now? That's why Peter, at the end of John chapter 13, speaks up in verse 36 and he says, Lord, where are you going? And Jesus just says, where I am going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow me afterwards. And Peter's like, Jesus, I'll follow you anyway. I'll even die for you. And Jesus is like, really? The truth of the matter is, Peter, the rooster will not crow till you have denied me 3 times. Like, can you just imagine the weight in that room? Like the disciples' minds must have been spinning. I mean, this is not how things were supposed to go down. Like Jesus was supposed to lead them into great freedom. Jesus was supposed to lead them to incredible things. Like life was supposed to be better in the days ahead because of Jesus' arrival. And yet now, seemingly, John chapter 13, beginning in chapter 14, now seemingly in one night, it all feels like it's falling apart. Like it's all like sand going through their fingers. And that's where we pick up the story. John chapter 14, beginning in verse 1. Jesus says to his disciples, so the disciples are the ones in the room. The 11 are in the room. Judas has already left at this point. John 14, verse 1, Jesus says, let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. And you know the way to where I'm going. Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you're going. How can we know the way? Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. Okay, so, I know this is one of those passages that is probably fairly familiar to you. Like you've probably heard this in a variety of different settings, or probably different even sermons on Sunday. But listen, this morning, as we think about this I am statement, I want us to look at 3 simple truths that come roaring from the text this morning. 3 simple truths that I believe could profoundly impact the trajectory of your life in this room even this morning. So 3 simple truths. First simple truth is this. Number 1, Jesus can be trusted in troubled times. Jesus can be trusted in troubled times. Like I've already told you, like this news that is surrounding this statement must have been incredibly unsettling. Like betrayal, departure, like Peter's denial, the possibility of Jesus' death. Like these aren't just small blips on the radar screen. Like these are tectonic shifts beneath the feet of the disciples. Like this is major upheaval in the foundation of their lives. And Jesus wasn't minimizing this, right? Like he understood what they were feeling. In fact, the very first words out of Jesus' mouth in John chapter 14 are, let not your hearts be troubled. And it's interesting because that word troubled there literally means to be stirred up, to be agitated, to be shaken. The word troubled there is used of ships at sea that were tossed to and fro by the waves, while the crew on board is holding on, trying to figure out how they can stay secure in the midst of the turmoil around them. The same word is used in John chapter 5. It's used of the stirring up of the waters at the pool of Bethsaida. In other words, listen, here's the reality. There are all kinds of circumstances in your life and mine that will cause our hearts to be troubled. Like there are all kinds of things that shake us to the core, all kinds of things that trouble us and disorient us, that stir anxiety and uncertainty within us. Like, am I right? Is that true? Like there are all kinds of things. Like just look at the world that we live in. I mean, you can turn on the news like 24 hours a day, and you will be bombarded with heart-wrenching stories of the world we live in. And the sad thing is, the more we watch these stories, the more desensitized we come to the evil and the brokenness in the world around us. But then occasionally there is an event or an action that is so unsettling that it rips the collective scab off of the wound, and culturally it troubles us to the core. And I think we've seen several examples of this just in the last few weeks. But then there are also deeply personal things that can trouble us, like friends who betray us, leaders who disappoint us, death that threatens the dreams inside of us. Like these were the very things that were troubling the hearts of the disciples, right? Or maybe for you, it's other things that trouble you. Maybe it's a wayward child, an unrelenting boss, an unloving spouse. Maybe it's an unresolved health issue, anxiety that wakes you up at 1 o'clock in the morning. Maybe it's an unmanageable budget, an unrealized dream. Maybe it's the inability to control what is happening all around you. Listen, the truth of the matter is, troubled hearts are stirred in many different ways. And yet I want you to know this morning that when you read John chapter 14, I want you to know that there is an antidote to the trouble that is in our hearts. And the antidote is always the same. Like Jesus says in verse 1, yes, let not your hearts be troubled. Literally what Jesus is saying in that passage is stop letting your hearts be stirred up. Like don't be troubled anymore. And you may think about that and you may go, well, man, Jesus, that's an easy thing to say. Like troubled hearts aren't easily calmed. So what's the antidote? Like what does Jesus say? Well, he keep reading. He says, believe in God, believe also in me. Now listen, I want to be really careful here because it could be really tempting to read those words like some kind of empty religious platitude. Almost like a Hallmark card that you get, and it says all of the right things, but somehow doesn't feel like it's grounded in reality. But I need you to understand that when Jesus says, don't let your heart be troubled, like stop letting your heart be troubled, believe in God, believe also in me. Listen, this is not some religious jargon. Like who is Jesus speaking to in the text? Well, he's speaking to the 11 disciples, right? Those who are closest to him. So listen, when Jesus says, believe in God, believe also in me, listen, he is not talking about an initial trust in God. He's not talking about an initial belief in God. Like these men had already believed in God. These men had already been with Jesus. They had sacrificed their livings to follow Jesus. And so when Jesus says, stop letting your hearts be troubled, instead, believe in me, what he is saying is, and even the grammar of this passage, even the grammar says, not just believe in God, but he's saying, listen to this, hear me today. Keep believing in God. Keep trusting his faithfulness. Keep believing his goodness. Keep relying on his sovereignty. Keep looking to his love and his work and his word. You see, listen, Jesus doesn't minimize or downplay or shame the disciples for the anxiety that they are feeling. No, instead, in grace, he reminds them of God's faithfulness. He comforts them with God's steadfast provision. Because listen, friends, in turbulent times, we must trust the one who's proven himself time and time again to be faithful. Like, is there anything in your life right now that is stirring you up inside? Like, is there anything in your life right now that you just need to give to the Lord? That is unsettling, that is causing you to be stirred up on the inside? Like, could I just encourage you this morning? Like, place it in the hands of the one who is always faithful. Like put it there. I'm not saying it's easy, but listen, I am saying that you can trust the one who's been faithful through the ages and is once again proving himself, even in the text, to be faithful for eternity. Because listen, Jesus can be trusted in troubled times. Amen? Second truth, number 2. Jesus is also working to bring us home. Jesus is working to bring us home. Now, in verses 2 and 3, Jesus uses a metaphor that is so intensely personal. And through the metaphor, we're going to see the very reason that Jesus had to go away. The very reason that Jesus had to suffer and die on the cross just a few hours from when this was written. And the reason is there was a work that must be done through the cross and the resurrection, a work that would prepare a place for them and a place for us in the Father's house. Right? Like, look at verse 2. Jesus says, "In my Father's house are many rooms, many dwelling places, many mansions. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go and prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also." Now, the reason that I call this an intensely personal scene is because the imagery that Jesus is giving us in this scene is the imagery of a wedding. And you may say, well, what, huh? In Jewish culture, when a young Hebrew man began to notice a young Hebrew girl, they might hang out for a little while, maybe have some nice conversations. I don't know, maybe go to the local Dairy Queen. But if it got serious, then it kind of got a little complicated. Because if the young Hebrew man thought that this young lady was wife material, and if they were of age, then the young man would go to his own father. And he would tell his father about this cute little girl that he's been hanging out with at the local Dairy Queen. And as he would tell him, if the dad likes the idea of the two of them maybe getting together, then the boy's dad would go and talk to the girl's dad. Like, how about we adopt that in our culture today, huh? Some of you with girls are like, yes, let's do that. So if the dad liked the idea, if the potential groom's dad likes the idea, he goes to the potential bride's dad. And if the two of them agreed, then check this out. The girl's dad would throw a big party. The girl's dad would throw a big party and would invite the groom-to-be's dad and all kinds of friends to the party. And at the party, the groom-to-be would bring a drink to the bride-to-be. And as he would bring the drink to the bride-to-be had a choice to make. If she accepts the cup, then it's a yes. But if she refuses the cup, then guess what? The party gets really awkward, right? Like somebody cue the Taylor Swift breakup songs, right? Like we're never, ever getting back together, right? I mean, it's coming. Shake it off, shake it off. All right, sorry, that's too much. But here's the important part of the story. If she says yes, then the young man would return to his father's house, and he would begin to build onto his father's house. And he would add rooms to the father's property to accommodate his future bride. So every day, the young man would go out and he would work on the rooms. He'd work with all of his might while the bride-to-be is waiting at home. Like she has no idea how long it's going to take. She has no idea the progress. Like she can't pull up her social media feed and see how the decorations are going. For all she knows, her groom-to-be is putting up posters of Dak Prescott and LeBron James in the bedroom, right? Like they have no idea. She has no idea the progress. For all she knew, it could be days or weeks. But the good news is the father was watching over the whole project. And the only way that the son could go and get his bride was if the father said, okay, the rooms are ready. You can go get her now. And you begin to think about this scene. And you begin to look at it in the context of John chapter 14. Do you see what Jesus is doing here? Jesus is conveying his deep, personal relationship with his disciples. Like, do you see in the text? Like Jesus is reminding us that faith in him is not a cold list of rules. It's not an empty religious ritual. Like it's not an oppressive system designed to keep all the good stuff from us. Like that's not what Christianity is about. No, faith in Christ at the core is about a relationship with Jesus. And what Jesus wants more than anything, according to John chapter 14, is to be with us. Like that he is where he is, that we would be also. And so Jesus' departure, while difficult, while incredibly uncomfortable, listen, was not unloving or unkind. In fact, if anything, Jesus' departure from their presence, though it was hard for them to understand what he was doing, that departure was actually the greatest display of love imaginable. Because without his work on the cross, through the resurrection, we would not have a place in the Father's house. And here's the good news. Jesus tells us that heaven is a real place. Did you notice the language? I'm going to prepare a what? A place for you. A place. Like heaven is not a figment of your imagination. Heaven is not just a state of mind. Heaven is not pie in the sky next to Santa's workshop. No, listen. Jesus says, in my Father's house, there is a place for you. And the Bible uses a variety of metaphors to help us to understand what this place is like. Like here in John chapter 14, Jesus describes it like a house with many different rooms, many different dwelling places. But in places like Hebrews chapter 11, the author describes it as a country. In Luke chapter 13, Jesus describes it as paradise. In Revelation chapter 21, heaven is described as a city, and it is a glorious city, a city whose walls are made of jasper. The walls have 12 gates that never close. They're guarded by 12 angels, And those 12 gates are made out of single pearls, like the streets made out of gold. And according to Revelation 22, verse 5, there is no need for light because the glory of Christ outshines the sun. Listen, my friend, this is our heavenly home. Like, this is what the Father's house is like. Like, this is why Christ had to die. This is why he eagerly awaits, that we should eagerly await his return, because there is only one, listen to me clearly, only one who can bring you home. And the greatest home isn't just a place, it is a person whose name is Jesus. Which leads us this morning to that third truth. And that is number 3, Jesus is the only way home. In verse 4, I can't help but kind of laugh when I read it, but verse 4, Jesus makes a pretty big assumption in verse 4. Like in all of this, Jesus says, almost like a tag at the end, and you know the way where I'm going. The disciples are kind of looking at each other like, don't know what you're talking about. Like all these metaphors and analogies. I'm so confused. And then Thomas, of all people, speaks up. Doubting Thomas. And he says in verse 5, Lord, we don't know where you're going. So how can we know the way? Like, thank you, Thomas, for saying what everybody was thinking, right? And that question is it's a pretty significant question, isn't it? Because if Jesus was dying and about to go back home to his Father's house, and if there's actually a way to get there, then doesn't it make sense that we would know the way? So what does Jesus do next? Well, in verse 6, Jesus says, listen, let me tell you the way. I am the way, and the truth, and the life. In fact, Jesus goes on to say, no one comes to the Father except through me. Now listen, I know that even as we read that verse, the potential is a verse like that could be incredibly unpopular in the world that we live in today. In fact, there are many who may hear that kind of message and think of Jesus that is the most unloving thing that anybody could ever say. Like, you're telling me there's only one way to heaven? Like, our culture would be much more comfortable saying that God is like a mountain, right? Like, there are many different paths that you can take to get up the mountain. Like, it doesn't matter which path you choose, because all religions, the culture would want us to say, all religions are leading to the same place. And you think about that, and in theory, it sounds really good. But I want you to stop and think about it with me. A couple of analogies might be helpful. Like, if I was on a trip to England and I wanted to get back home, and I went to London Heathrow Airport, and I started asking random people, like, hey, could you help me to get home? Like, could you help me get to Waco? I would imagine that there would be a bunch of different answers if you asked a bunch of different people. I mean, some people, I'm pretty sure, would be pretty passionate. They would point me to their favorite airline and they'd say, this is the only way to get back home. But then there might be other people who would just kind of brush me off, perhaps not even think about it, not even want to engage in a conversation. But what if there were others who began to say to me, you know what, Chris, it doesn't matter what gate you go to. Like, just pick a gate. Just get on a plane. You'll eventually find yourself on your way home. Like, that might sound really good. It might even sound loving. Like, just get on a plane. Life's an adventure. You'll eventually get there. Just get on something that's going somewhere. But the truth is, sincerity alone won't change the destination that the plane is taking me. You see, the problem is that advice like this is probably not going to lead me to Waco. In fact, it is quite likely to lead me to any other place but Waco, Texas. Because if you want to get home, you've got to know the way. And Jesus is saying, I am the only way home. You see, the problem with the mountain analogy is that it assumes that the way to heaven is by working hard to follow a particular path. And that if you work hard enough and follow close enough to your particular path, then you will eventually make your way up the mountain. But the whole point of the Bible, the whole point of the gospel story is, listen, we aren't very good at following directions. Have you noticed that? In fact, there is no way that we could work hard enough, follow the path close enough to ever reach the top of the mountain. In fact, you know, we've talked about what sheep are like. Sheep are more likely to jump in a ditch after a ditch, or maybe just go off the side of the mountain. But here's the good news of the gospel. The God of the mountain doesn't say, work your way up to me. He says, through Jesus, I will come down to you. I will give my life for yours. I will cover your mistakes, and I will grab you by the hand and put you on my back, and I will lead you to my Father's house. Why? Because Jesus is the only way, the truth, and the life. Like, Jesus is the only one who can make sense of the world that we live in. Jesus is the only one who can give us the life that we crave for. Jesus is the only one who provides us with access to a relationship with the Lord that gives us the satisfaction that we long for. Brothers and sisters, hear me today. There is only one way to experience the life that God has for us. There's only one way home, and that is through Jesus Christ, our Lord. As I close this morning, could I ask you to do an experiment with me? We don't do experiments much in church, but I think you're up to it today. Sun shining. You ready? Here's the experiment. Part one. Why don't you take your index finger and just put it in the air. I'm not going to embarrass anybody. It's okay. Part two. I want you to close your eyes, and as you close your eyes, I'm going to count to 3. And I want you to point north. Ready? No, don't talk about it. Close your eyes. Ready? Point north at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Wow. We got fingers going in all directions. The correct answer is that way is north. Some of you, we will have GPS available at the door as you leave. Now, why do I do that experiment? Because listen, you can believe with everything that is in you that way is north. But I promise you, if you go in your car and you travel that way, you will never reach Oklahoma. I mean, you can be sincere in your attempts. You can fill up your gas tank 5 times before you get to El Paso. But there's only one way. to get to where you want to go. I love that some of you were like this. That's cheating. But the truth of the matter is, Jesus declares to us this morning, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man, no woman, no boy or girl comes to the Father except through him. So, is your heart troubled today? Are you searching for answers, searching for something to satisfy? Spiritually wandering, I would say to you, Jesus is the true north. Would you believe in him and trust him to lead you home?